Do you have an expired cake for my daughter? Maya's voice trembled, but the cashier didn't hesitate. He didn't even pause. He threw his head back and laughed, loud enough for everyone in the bakery to hear. Employees froze. His smirk was sharp, and Maya, clutching her daughter's small hand, felt her stomach drop. She didn't have money, she didn't have power. All she had was honesty, and a long walk from a neighborhood the bakery's customers would never step foot in. I just wanted something for her birthday, even a cake that's a day old, she stammered. I didn't know who else to ask. The cashier scoffed. You expect me to believe that? Maya's fingers tightened around her daughter's hand. She wanted to turn and run. She wanted to disappear. But then, from the corner of the room, the old man in the blue suit moved forward. The billionaire owner of the bakery, quiet until now, had heard every single word. His eyes fell on Maya and her daughter, and in that instant, everything changed. Before we continue, I want to speak to you for a moment. If stories like this remind you that kindness still exists, if they make you feel something real in a world that's getting louder and colder, then I'd love to have you here with us. This channel isn't just videos. It's a tiny corner of the internet where good people come together, where we believe in second chances, in hope and in humanity. And right now, you're early. You're part of the very first people building this family with me. So if you want to grow with us, if you want more stories that touch your heart, go ahead and subscribe. It's free, it supports the channel more than you know, and it tells me that there are still people out there who believe in kindness just as much as I do. If you have subscribed to this channel, I can officially say, welcome to the family. Now back to the story. On a warm, bright afternoon, sunlight spilled across the streets like liquid gold, illuminating the small shops along Crescent Street. Inside the Crescent Street bakery, the air was thick with the comforting aroma of freshly baked bread, warm pastries, and the sweetness of perfectly glazed cakes. Customers moved in and out, laughing quietly, exchanging greetings with the staff, and oblivious to the world outside their little bubble of comfort. But outside that bubble, the world had been unkind to Maya Thompson. The weight of life pressed down on her shoulders as she stood just beyond the bakery door, dust clinging to her worn shoes. The fabric of her dress faded and creased from weeks of long workdays and hurried walks. In her hand, she held the small, calloused fingers of her daughter, Amara, whose wide eyes shimmered with a fragile mix of hope and exhaustion. Maya's stomach twisted in knots. She had walked 3 long blocks from her neighborhood, dodging the honks of impatient drivers, the broken sidewalks, and the jeers of children who had more than she did. And she had done it all for one small thing, a moment of sweetness for her daughter's birthday. Not a grand cake with tears or elaborate icing, just something. Something that had been thrown out at the end of the day, something no one else wanted. Her heart pounded as she stepped inside. The bakery smelled like warmth, comfort, and memories she couldn't afford. The polished floors reflected the sunlight, the shelves gleamed with fresh loaves stacked neatly, and cakes sat behind glass, decorated like jewels. Maya lowered her gaze, afraid of the looks that might meet her, judgment, disbelief, or scorn. Amara's small hand squeezed hers. The little girl's eyes drifted toward a strawberry-topped cake behind the glass, silent, timid, afraid to ask. Maya cleared her throat, her voice trembling. Do you have an expired cake for my daughter? The words felt heavier than she had expected. She had said them in a whisper, but the bakery seemed to hold its breath. For a moment, no one spoke. Then the cashier, a tall young man with sharp features and an impatience that hid behind forced politeness, laughed. Not quietly, not politely. He threw his head back and laughed loud enough for the entire bakery to hear. Employees froze. A customer turned around in surprise. The polite hum of the ovens seemed to pause, and Maya felt her stomach drop as the color drained from her face. She didn't have money. She didn't have influence. She didn't have a receipt, a coupon, or any way to prove she belonged there. All she had was honesty, and the courage that hunger and love for a child forced into her. I just wanted something for her birthday," she stammered, her voice barely rising above the hum of the ovens. "Even a cake that's a day old. I didn't know who else to ask." The cashier smirked, leaning forward slightly, his tone sharp. "You expect me to believe that?" Maya's fingers tightened around Amara's hand. She wanted to run. She wanted to vanish from the polished floors and the scent of sugar that reminded her of the world she couldn't afford. She felt the hot sting of humiliation creeping up her neck. But then she noticed him. At the far end of the bakery, seated near the display of artisan breads, was an older man in a blue suit. His posture was quiet but dignified. Unlike the other patrons, he wasn't laughing or staring. He wasn't frowning. He was watching. Every word Maya had spoken, every tremor in her voice, every anxious glance from Amara. He had heard it all. This was Roland Vance, the billionaire owner of the bakery, a man whose reputation for quiet generosity preceded him only in whispers among the city's elite. He didn't need to prove his wealth or kindness. He simply observed, his piercing eyes reflecting understanding, empathy, and something far rarer than people often believed money could buy, a heart that still felt. Maya didn't know who he was. She didn't know he had quietly arrived earlier to inspect the bakery's new deliveries. All she knew was that the laughter, the mockery, and the impossible odds of her request pressed down on her chest. Amara's fingers twitched in her hand. She could see the little girl's longing, the quiet hope she dared not speak. Roland leaned forward slightly, his hands resting calmly on the table. For a moment, the world slowed. The cashier, the employees, the customers, they were all blurred in the background. All that existed was the mother, her daughter, and the fragile honesty of a single request. He rose, moving silently toward the counter. He didn't announce himself. He didn't call attention to the blue of his suit or the weight of his fortune. He simply asked the staff to prepare a cake. The freshest one, the most beautiful one, a vanilla sponge layered with cream and berries, decorated with care as if it had been made for royalty. And then he added more. Warm meals, pastries, sandwiches, enough to fill a bag so that Maya and Amara could sit together in the quiet safety of nourishment, away from hunger and judgment. Maya watched in stunned confusion. The cashier smirked, unsure what was happening. Maya's heart raced, caught between disbelief and gratitude. She didn't speak. She only clutched Amara's hand, the little girl's eyes widening as she realized something miraculous was happening. Roland handed the bag to the cashier and nodded toward Maya. His voice was soft, calm, yet full of authority. "Please," he said gently, "give this to them." The world felt impossibly heavy for Maya, then suddenly lighter. Tears pricked the corners of her eyes as she accepted the bag. The staff softened. The cashier looked down, ashamed, unable to meet her gaze. Amara squealed quietly, her small face lighting up as she peeked into the bag and saw the cake. For a moment, Maya forgot the hours of struggle, the empty cupboards, the exhaustion. Her daughter's joy, simple and pure, was a balm she hadn't felt in months. Roland stepped back, letting the moment exist without interference. He didn't want praise. He didn't want thanks. He simply allowed humanity to flow freely, like sunlight through the bakery's windows. Maya whispered a quiet, shaky, "Thank you." But he had already turned toward the door, disappearing into the sunlight outside. The warm breeze followed him, almost as if the city itself acknowledged the kindness he had shown. Maya sank onto a small bench outside the bakery. Amara clutched her cake tightly, the berries gleaming like tiny stars. Maya felt her own heart swell, a quiet hope stirring where despair had lived for too long. For the first time in weeks, she allowed herself to breathe, and in the back of her mind, she realized something she hadn't understood before. Sometimes it wasn't grand gestures or millions of dollars that changed a life. Sometimes it was a simple act of kindness delivered at the perfect moment. The cashier, the employees, the customers, they all watched silently, touched by the scene unfolding. Some even whispered apologies for their earlier judgment. But for Maya and Amara, nothing else mattered. All that mattered was a cake. All that mattered was a small act of recognition. All that mattered was the knowledge that someone had seen them, really seen them, and chosen to act. As Maya tucked her daughter close and handed her a small fork, Amara's smile seemed to stretch wider than the bench they sat on. And in that moment, the world, though harsh and unyielding outside the bakery walls, felt just a little bit brighter. Maya sat on the bench outside the bakery, her hands trembling as she carefully set the bag of food and the cake between her and Amara. The little girl's eyes sparkled as she peeked at the layers of cream, berries glistening in the afternoon sunlight. "I can't believe it. We actually have a cake," Amara whispered, her voice filled with awe. She clutched her fork, almost afraid to touch the treasure before her. Maya forced a smile, brushing a loose strand of hair from her daughter's face. She had been so tired, so beaten down by life, that a small thing like a cake felt almost impossible to believe. And yet here it was, a symbol that the world might still hold moments of kindness. Inside the bakery, the cashier fumed silently. His smirk had vanished the moment he saw the billionaire, Roland Vance, quietly orchestrate the act of generosity. He couldn't comprehend how one simple request had shifted the balance of power. Roland had returned to his seat, observing quietly from the corner. He didn't want to embarrass the cashier publicly. He didn't want to make Maya feel like charity was being flaunted. This wasn't a performance, this was humanity. And yet something clicked inside the young man at the counter. Pride, arrogance, and habit had ruled his life, but for the first time he felt the sting of shame, not because Maya had asked for help, but because he had laughed at her. Outside, Maya carefully handed Amara a small slice of cake. The girl's eyes widened as she took a bite, her little hands shaking with joy. "You like it?" Maya asked softly. Amara nodded, her mouth full, crumbs clinging to her lips. "It's the best cake ever, Mama," she whispered. Maya's heart ached and swelled at the same time. It wasn't just a cake, it was hope. It was proof that sometimes, even when the world seemed cruel, someone noticed. Someone cared. Roland, observing quietly, felt something stir inside him too. He had buried pain years ago, loss that money could never replace. But seeing Maya and Amara, two souls quietly pushed into shadows, he realized that wealth and power were meaningless without moments like this, without humanity. He decided then to do more, not for recognition, not for headlines, but because he could. He quietly beckoned the cashier to the side. "Listen," Roland said in a calm, measured voice. "Mocking someone for asking an honest question, that's not acceptable in my bakery." The cashier's jaw tightened. He tried to speak, to argue, but Roland's calm authority silenced him. "You will apologize to her," Roland continued, "and reflect on the way you treat others." The young man left, fuming, but Maya would never know that justice had quietly been served. Roland didn't want her attention. He wanted the world around her, the small acts, the small kindnesses to be enough. Then came another surprise. Amara, still clutching her cake, turned to her mother with innocent curiosity. "Mama, can we come here more often?" she asked. Maybe other kids could have a cake too." Maya laughed softly, brushing crumbs from Amara's dress. The girl's words, simple and unassuming, sparked an idea in Roland. In that moment, he decided the bakery would hold a special day for kids in the neighborhood, where any child could come and enjoy a cake, no questions asked. Amara had unknowingly inspired something far bigger than a single birthday treat. Maya didn't know it yet, but Roland's quiet act of noticing her and her daughter would ripple outward in ways she could never imagine. It wasn't just about today. It was about the lives he could touch quietly, secretly, and meaningfully. As Maya packed the rest of the food into her bag, she noticed Roland standing at the doorway. Their eyes met for a brief moment. She didn't know his name, she didn't know who he was, but she felt something she hadn't in a long time. Hope. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice breaking slightly. Roland nodded, a small, almost imperceptible smile touching his lips. He didn't say more. He didn't need to. The moment itself spoke volumes. Maya left the bakery with Amara's hand in hers, their steps light despite the weight of the world still pressing on them. But they carried something now that money couldn't buy, the knowledge that someone cared, that the world still had room for kindness. And that knowledge was powerful enough to keep them moving forward, even in the hardest times. Maya stepped out of the bakery, her heart still pounding from the surreal encounter. Amara clutched her mother's hand, the cake safely tucked in the bag between them. The sunlight seemed softer now, warmer somehow, as if the world itself had taken a deep breath and allowed a little goodness to shine through. But even as they walked, Maya couldn't shake the disbelief. How had this happened? How had a simple request for a discarded cake led to this? As they rounded the corner, the door of the bakery opened behind them, and Roland Vance stepped out. The billionaire in the blue suit, quiet, dignified, unassuming, stood there for a moment, just watching them. "Excuse me," Maya said softly, her voice barely audible over Amara's soft chatter. I don't know how to thank you." Roland smiled, a warmth that seemed to reach deep into the soul. "No thanks needed," he said gently. "You and Amara just reminded me how much power honesty and courage hold. Sometimes people forget that the smallest actions, truth, kindness, can change everything." Maya's eyes widened as he continued. "I'd like to offer you a job here at the bakery, full-time, with benefits, a chance to build something better for you and Amara. You don't have to worry about whether there's food on the table, not anymore." Her hand went to her mouth. She wanted to cry, to scream, to collapse with relief. She hadn't imagined that one day her honesty, her courage, her willingness to ask for help would lead to something so life-changing. Amara tugged at her sleeve. "Mama? Really?" "Yes, baby," Maya whispered, tears spilling down her cheeks. "Really?" Inside the bakery, the cashier who had mocked her earlier watched silently. The embarrassment was clear on his face. Roland had addressed the situation quietly, but effectively. Maya didn't need to hear apologies. The gesture of accountability was enough. Roland led them inside. Maya's eyes took in the bakery again, rows of freshly baked goods, sunlight spilling over the counters, the warmth of a place where smiles didn't hide judgment. And now it would be a place where she and Amara could belong, truly. Amara's small hands gripped a fork, her laughter spilling through the air. The bakery, which had moments ago felt so intimidating, now became a space of wonder, possibility, and joy. Later that week, Roland quietly arranged for a children's cake day, inspired by Amara's words from that first day. Families from the neighborhood lined up, children's eyes wide with excitement, many of them never having tasted a birthday cake before. Maya watched her daughter serve tiny slices, her face radiant. "Look, Mama," Amara whispered, "we're helping other kids be happy too." Maya hugged her tight, feeling a weight lift from her chest. She realized something profound. One small act, one honest request, had not only changed her life but created ripples that touched countless others. Roland observed quietly from the back of the bakery. He didn't need applause, headlines, or recognition. The joy in the eyes of Maya, Amara, and the children was enough. The moment reflected a simple truth. Kindness, honesty, and courage can spark miracles. Weeks later, Maya and Amara settled into a new rhythm. Work, laughter, and cake-filled afternoons replaced hunger and worry. And every time they passed the old cashier, Maya didn't feel anger, just gratitude that life had a way of balancing itself. One evening, As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the city in gold and pink, Maya and Amara walked home, holding hands. Amara turned and whispered, "Mama, do you think someone else will ask for a cake too?" Maya smiled, brushing her daughter's hair from her face. "I hope they do, baby. I hope they do. Because kindness always finds a way to grow." And far away, Roland Vance closed the bakery's doors, his blue suit catching the last rays of sunlight. He had started the day with a simple routine, but by listening, observing, and acting, he had reminded himself, and the world, that one person's compassion can change lives in ways that no one expects. Maya, Amara, and the bakery became more than just a story of survival. They became a story of hope, courage, and the quiet, unstoppable power of humanity. Sometimes all it takes is a single act of honesty, a small request, or the voice of a child to change a life forever. Thank you for watching this story to the end. If you enjoyed this story, you will surely love the next one. It's as crazier and more intriguing as you can ever imagine, so do check it out. Click on the image showing on your screen right now to watch the next one.